Welcome to ARM Presents Fireside Chats, panel discussions looking at the business potential of technology. In today's Fireside Chat, we're looking at how the factory and warehouse of the future are evolving. There are more stringent requirements on flexibility, safety, autonomy, and performance. The panel will explore those trends, including workload consolidation and how the industry is likely to respond. Today's moderator is John Heinlein from ARM.
Hello and welcome to today's panel discussion on the future of industrial automation and smart manufacturing. I'm excited this is going to be a far-reaching discussion, and we have a lot of topics we can cover in this area, and we brought together some fantastic industry experts to join us. And so that you can associate a voice with a name, let's have each of them introduce themselves. First, I'm your host, John Heinlein. I'm the Vice President of High Performance IoT at ARM. Joining us also, we have Stefan. Stefan, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, John. Pleasure for joining the talk today. My name is Stefan Schönegger, and I'm the VP of Product Strategy and Innovation at Bernecker and located in Austria, Europe.
And we also have Neil, also from ARM. Neil, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, Neil Stroud. So I'm the Senior Director of our Industrial Sector business based in Austin.
All right. And these guys have a ton of experience in this area going back many, many years. And I think we can cover any topic under the sun in this area. So let's start by maybe framing the discussion. Why do you think we're here? Maybe, Stefan, as you're a leader within the industry, can you start with your perspective on what's the scope of the problem we should discuss today?
I think, John, let me first frame the scope of the industry we are talking today. I think to make it more plausible to the audience today, I try to give some examples. So taking automotive, we are not the ones that build devices that will be used in a car, but we are the ones that deliver equipment that's needed to manufacture a car. And the same is if you touch the consumer topics. We are not the ones that you would be used together with a wearable, but we deliver the equipment that's needed to manufacture a wearable. And that really goes across the industry, including food and beverage, pharma, and many others. And basically what we do is we deliver, we as the automation companies, we deliver equipment that's needed for production machines, that's needed for robotic, that's needed for warehouses in order to actually make the manufacturing happening. And the frame of our today's discussion is really the question, what's the future of automation? And to try to give it a few simple terms. Well, basically, we are striving for operational excellence. We are the OT companies. And what we are shooting for is really to make the manufacturing as smart as possible. And if you really extrapolate the word smart to really where it can go, then you finally will end in the term autonomous factories. Other would refer to it as dark factories. So that's really where it's driving us. And what is our thought of what will bring us there? Then it's really when it comes to the IoT, and that's really when I'm happy to have such a discussion with colleagues from ARM or other from your ecosystem to really find out on what's bringing us there together.
That's great. And can you maybe introduce just a few words about your company, BNR? It's part of ABB. Can you explain just a little bit of context for the listeners?
Yes, we are basically part of the ABB group. We are a $1 billion company. We are basically headquartered in Austria, Europe, but we have subsidiaries all across the globe. And basically, we live off exporting to wherever there is smart manufacturing needed. That's where we're heading for. And key products we are supplying to the market is really all around PLCs. It's all around motors, drives, some part of sensors, but also looking really what came to the market last years and also on the way going forward. Then we really also are at what's called the edge equipment. And yeah, that's driving us, and that's trying to add value to the market.
Perfect. That's great. Neil, I'd love you to give some introduction as well. And Stefan also mentioned IT and OT, and it might be good for you to explain that convergence, which is an important trend.
Yeah, sure. Industrials are a really interesting market, and I mean, ARM's been playing in the space for a long time. There's a huge, broad spectrum of use cases. If we think back to more traditional manufacturing with industrial automation, looking at the kind of control of production lines. I talk about this as kind of classical automation. And as we think about this is how we segment the market. And Stefan mentioned the IoT and this, getting connectivity and connecting the unconnected and allowing you to look at the production line and seeing how it's performing and the optimization and this road to autonomy. So I think you can break that into the IT, so kind of the information technology networking, which is more of the traditional networking in industrial PCs, and then the operational technology, which is the production lines itself. And historically, these two networks have lived very separate lives. So the factory will be very isolated from the outside world. But we're seeing as we make this journey to autonomy, these two networks are beginning to converge into a single network. So that's what we mean by IT-OT convergence. So I think it's really interesting how this market's going to evolve over the coming years on this journey to autonomy and the smart manufacturing that we're heading towards. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, I'm sure, as we get through this podcast.
That's great. And I think that convergence you talk about is both brings opportunities to improve these solutions, but it also brings some challenges and some new technical requirements that might not have been there before. So let's dive right in. Let's start maybe with a little controversial topic. I always like to spice things up a little bit. So maybe starting with you, Stefan, what's your overall impression? I mean, is the industry delivering what you need to achieve the promise that you described in terms of this automation, and where are the gaps?
Well, John, now I could give a very diplomatic answer. Then it would be it depends. But I think to make it easy, it's a no. So I think what we do expect in terms of like all the things we need in our market, it's the way we use the hardware, the way we deal with software, but also the physical constraints of the devices. It got closer over the last years and decades, but I would say we are still quite a bit away from what we really would like to get.
Okay, well that frames a lot of topics we can cover. Neil, what's your take on this, and where do you see the challenge and the gaps?
So I think it's a really interesting time because it's clear that the industrial segment's going through somewhat of a disruption, and we're at an inflection point, I think. Historically, as I said before, these worlds have been very isolated from the factory, been very isolated from the outside world. But there's some mega topics that are having to get solved around security and connectivity, and this whole autonomous thing as well is a big unknown challenge ahead of all of us. So I think as an industry we have to come together and begin to solve some of these problems. So I think it's not just about the evolution and making products faster or shorter cycle times. That there's an element of revolution here as well that we all have to solve together.
Okay, so a lot of different aspects coming together at once. And Stefan, you mentioned a couple different topics, so maybe we should break this apart. You talked about the hardware requirements and some of the needs from the hardware side, and some others. And so let's go into those one at a time. Let's begin first with hardware. What are you seeing that's attractive, and what are the gaps you need that you see from the hardware side from the market?
I think let's start with what we see, what is attractive, and what we can really make use in a good way, and that's really when it comes to the topic of compute power or also basically power consumption per compute power. I think these are things where our ecosystem or our suppliers really leverage what's used also in the consumer space. So that's the good side of things. On the other end of the medal, compute power is not everything, especially when it comes to autonomously basically behaving systems in the aspect of safety as well as of HEVs, robots, because there also real time really plays a crucial role, and compute power is really not the only KPI for a CPU and for a high performance CPU. So real time is really one of the aspects where we see options to improve. And then the other side of the medal is really when it comes down to the integration level. So what we see is really in the ecosystem of electronics and chips we need to use and put on our PCBs and on our products. I think there is really room for improvement on the integration level. We scale down the nanometer architectures, but we really don't leverage what would fit into one single piece of either silicon or at least of one single package. And I think there is room. And that's really what we would believe.
So it sounds... And Stefan, actually, sorry to interrupt you, John. I just wanted to dig in on a comment you just made. So you said we need to improve real time. Why is that so important?
Well, it's at the end, it really, if you compare real time with the expectation from the consumer world, then real time is defined by what a human being will recognize or not recognize. So if you open an app or a game on a mobile phone, then really is what the user can recognize, and that's really that's a high digit millisecond behavior of so that basically the refresh rates of websites, or as I said, the movement of games, it really seems good. But when it comes to a sensor reacting to a moving part or anything like that, we talk microseconds. So there is a factor of literally hundreds or even thousands in between of what kind of response time is needed on certain actions or on certain behaviors. And that can have just a functional impact, basically machines not producing good enough, not precise enough, but that can have also a safety impact of basically a robot not stopping fast enough once a human enters the safe zone of a robot.
Yeah, it's important to remember, I guess, that when you're talking about a giant robot or even a smaller robot, sometimes the tolerances and the precision they're trying to achieve are such that a microsecond or some small number of microseconds makes a big difference in terms of the accuracy that's produced. That's very interesting. So you talked about a number of things there, Neil. What's your take on this, and how do those aspects play together?
Yeah, I think. Clearly, real-time and deterministic performance is a key thing we need to solve here, and I think it's also obvious that safety and real-time go hand in hand. You have to solve those two holistically. I think also, Stefan, you talked about performance, and I think certainly from what we've seen in the engagements we've got, I think it's one step further than that. I think it's the scalable performance. So having an architecture that scales from the smallest thing right at the edge of the network all the way up to the cloud, and that kind of capability seems to resonate in the industry. I think there's a lot of fragmentation that we've seen in the industry from that perspective. So we think about these things holistically. So it's how do these four things come together, three or four things. So it's certainly the performance and scalable performance. It's certainly the safety and the functional safety elements, and what we need to do there. I think security is another one, and that's a huge topic. But it's not just about security in isolation. It's about the end-to-end security. So how do we solve the problem not just for the chip itself, but also thinking about the software, thinking about what does that mean for the system integrator? What does that mean for the factory operator? So that holistic security solution, and then the real time at the end. So it's those four things all coming together, and whether you're looking at industrial automation, the more traditional use cases, or whether it's the newer use cases around IoT and connectivity and gateways, or whether it's robotics, you always need either all or some of those things to come together into the platform holistically. So that's absolutely the way ARM looks at this and how we solve those problems together. I think the other thing to think about as well is, and I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this, Stefan, is the time it takes for the innovation of silicon, and whether as an industry we're going quick enough there, because there's certainly a period of time that it takes from when we deliver our IP to it being realized in silicon. So are we going fast enough there, or do we need to do a better job as well?
That's the usual answer will be we always need to go faster, and for sure that's also, we know that we put a very controversial request also to our supply chain, because on the one hand we want things to go faster, innovate faster, and really get the things very timely. On the other hand, we need our supply chain to deliver products literally for decades at the same form, fit and function compatibility. So that's we need them faster, and on the other hand, yes, we are aware that we put a really tension on the supply chain here.
So Neil, if I take the points you made, you talked about scalable performance, real-time capabilities, security. Those are all pretty well understood by most people, most listeners in context of their own experience, although there may be different amounts of it in the industrial market. But functional safety, let's take another minute to talk about functional safety, because that's something which you don't typically see in other markets. And I want to get a sense from you, Stefan. I mean, do you see functional safety as integral? Because we've seen a range of solutions in the market where functional safety is baked in from the start, or where it's kind of bolted on, artificially from the outside with brute force solutions. What do you see as the best approach to solve this?
Well, basically looking even at our own history in safety. So B&R started with functional safety close to 20 years ago. And when we started, it was the brute force bolted on approach. And once we really did our principal lessons and we really got the market feedback. And meanwhile, it's all inbuilt. So safety has to be an integral part of the design, of the behavior, of the device capability. And that's really the way forward. So there is only one solution, and the solution has to be intrinsically safe, both in the term of functional safety, but also, of course, in the point of view of security. And really, that's the way forward.
So I'm glad to hear that. ARM has spent a lot of time investing in functional safety. It's an area that perhaps we're less well known, but in fact we've been investing for years. And so I think we'll be talking more about that in the future. And I'm thrilled to hear we're on target. You also talked about long-term support from silicon providers, and I think that is important, because once you design a platform, you tend to manufacture it and live with it for years. What typical requirements do you see from your specs? How long do you need support for generally?
So basically, we need to provide the products toward our customers somewhere between 15 up to 25 or even longer. So really, that's the life cycle of production machines. Once they are installed, they usually keep going until they fall apart. And as they are heavy mechanical pieces, so unfortunately or fortunately, they don't do. So from that point of view, really, that's the life cycle we are looking for.
And I guess it's an interesting dilemma, because, to go back to a point you made earlier on, the rate of innovation is accelerating, yet the deployed base is staying where it always was, that 10, 15, 20 years. Do you not see that reducing a little bit, or do you think we're stuck with that?
Absolutely, that's a challenge, and I think that's also one element where maybe even the ecosystem of silicon could really walk towards us, because we have to, on the one hand, maintain platforms for 15, 20, 25 years, but maybe with the same functionality, maybe a part of the security updates and everything. But on the other hand, really bring new families, new generations, new functionality every year, and with this, it means we are really actively and in parallel supporting up to 10, 15, 20 different product families. So what we would really need there is also a much better support in terms of what can we leverage from the market, what can we reuse, what has been built, and where our domain knowledge comes best into the game, and how can we make best use of our own resources to add value for our market.
Well, that maybe is a perfect segue to talking about software, because if we say the hardware is going to have a long life, there's a bit of a creative tension towards getting innovation versus longer life. But it sounds like there's a lot of software issues as well. So maybe we could dig into that and say, what are the trends and challenges you're seeing there that you'd like the ecosystem to address, and maybe where do you see how the software could potentially evolve, even if the hardware has to be longer lived? Maybe Neil, do you want to start first and talk about some of the things we're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been a very interesting journey, I would say, over the last 10 or so years or 15 years that I've been working with industrial customers. I think historically, these have typically been very closed systems with a lot of proprietary software. Each OEM has their very special and focused solutions. And typically they're based around commercial offerings from the industry, that there was very little open source there, for example. So I think this rate of innovation is definitely driving some new investigations, new behaviors in the industry. There's a big focus on looking at open source and how that can fit into this new world of smart manufacturing. And obviously that will have a big impact on how things get deployed and rolled out. I think also, there's a lot of activity as far as consortiums and groups coming together to try and solve these problems when we look at open source. So certainly one of the hot topics at the moment, for example, is, it goes back to the functional safety topic actually, is, open source is absolutely great and it's used all over the place. But when you think about functional safety, the last thing you want is to be able to change things or update things or tweak things. Functional safety kind of says that you lock it and you don't touch it and you know exactly what it is. So things like Zen Industrial looking at safety certified hypervisors and the newly formed ELISA, so enabling Linux in safety applications, this project as well to look at safety certified Linux. I think they're two great examples of how the industry is looking to move forward as a whole. So I think there are changes afoot, and that's before we even start to talk about the developer and how developers plug themselves into this ecosystem as well. So it's certainly interesting and challenging times. So Stefan, what's your view here?
I think, let's pick up the topic of the license. I think the history of our industry for sure is that it's always based on commercial licensing. Anyhow, I think meanwhile, we all recognize that we should really be license agnostic. And what we are looking at is which solution, whether open source or commercial, is really giving us the best value. And I can only encourage the ecosystem to really deliver more. And what you mentioned with a safety solution, and as I said, it isn't relevant if it's commercial open source. Relevant is in what way can we extend it? Is the license, whatever it is, industry friendly? And is it really well supported and maintained? I think these are the criteria that really weigh most. And on the other hand, in my opinion, there is much more functionality that really could be added on top of the hardware, where really there's no differentiation. Let's just take communication or connectivity topics such as OPC UA or TSN. These are open standards. There is no reason to differentiate. So there is also no value of doing that individually by each automation company. So I think that the market is really, really happy to take things that are coming from the ecosystem. It's not there today, but I think that's really the opportunity for the ecosystem to improve here. And last but not least, what I really want to stress here, and you asked me initially, John, if I'm happy or not, and I mentioned I'm not happy with the software. Well, there's always something you can do more. So that's the one side of the answer. But the other one is really also it needs to be easy to use. Our industry has a strong OT background. There are many engineers that have a mechanical engineering background, and companies enter in really large corporations really transition towards becoming software companies. But that's not the history. That's not the heritage. So we also need to make it easy to use. To really, in a very easy way, access all that functionality, and that's of course the job of the ecosystem.
So I think there's always a trade-off between doing everything yourself, and I know some companies feel as if they need to do everything themselves, but it sounds like what you're saying is there's a growing willingness and openness to standardize on some of these non-differentiating layers to provide a better foundation and better consistency while still maintaining the ability to differentiate your solutions and your value add on top of it. Is that right?
Absolutely. Really nothing to be added on this statement.
Well, good. And we talked about hardware before, and this software has been very interesting, but we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the unique nature of the industrial market, because there are a lot of specific details in terms of the constrained physical environment and the thermal environment, the safety environment, whether it ranges from cooling and fans being undesirable. So maybe it would be helpful for you to educate us a little bit on some of the challenges you face in designing systems in your environment, and what requirements does that put on the systems and the elements that go into it.
Yeah, just maybe take a few examples. So for example, when it comes to the topic of thermal issues, so basically, if you compare with a consumer device, then usually you have operating temperatures somewhere between 0 or maybe -5, -10, and then maybe it goes up to 40, 45, 50.
You're talking Celsius.
We mount electronics we mount motors, we mount electronics on motors, and the motors itself is placed somewhere in the Sahara to operate a substation. So we reach ambient temperatures of 80, 90, 100, 110, 120 of the for the electronics. So this is really putting a lot of stress on the electronics. And the other side is really vibrations. Just think about the presses used in the body shops of automotive factories. So that's really, these are tough environments for the electronic equipment, and that needs to be considered.
And I think that's a great point. And I think whilst some of that impacts the silicon design, of course, I think there are certainly things that we can do as an IP supplier as well, because a lot of this comes down to performance per watt. So having a much more efficient architecture can certainly help you in these designs, to cram in the performance you need for passive cooling at the same time. So we're certainly there to support you with that, Stefan.
And that's great. I think supporting a range of performance capabilities, the scalability argument we talked about before has been important in other markets, but it sounds like it's growing in importance for you as well, where you need to support a range of applications with maybe a common software base, but you still need to have the consistent hardware. Okay. Well, this is exciting. I mean, if we think about this, it almost begs the question, why doesn't just B&R do their own chip? It sounds like you've got a clear understanding of your requirements. They're very specific. Just do your own. Why aren't you doing that?
Well, John, I have to correct you. We did. So basically, B&R did own ASICs. B&R even developed own MCU IPs, and that was at a time when maybe even ARM was much smaller and not so common around the globe. But really, looking at this from today's point of view, that's not a game we should play in. We really need to focus on where we can add value and where we can differentiate and where we really help our customers to improve automation topics, and that's not in the silicon play. So really, we want to rely on the silicon ecosystem. That's our way forward. And if we did something different in the past, that was maybe for lack of availability of certain maybe attributes like real time. But going forward, really, we need to play where we play best, and that's automation, and we want to add there. And there's another topic, we wouldn't even have the skill set, and we don't want to recruit that skill set to make that happen. We really want to add value in the automation space and not on the silicon side.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier on about some level of standardization and not reinventing the wheel and relying on the ecosystem to provide those standard building blocks, which I think the ARM ecosystem does very well. And I think it's a great point, and one of the things we work very hard on is how we can accelerate that innovation and give you access to new products sooner. So looking at models-based development as well, so you can start developing sooner. You're not waiting for silicon to come along. So there's a whole range of tools and models out there that help you to do that innovation and accelerate the time to market.
And I assume you also are doing innovation at the system level. Do you do much innovation at the board level, or what's the level of abstraction you're interested to work at?
Really, what our customers look at us is the system level. So basically, they really want to go productivity go up. They want the quality levels to go up. They want basically downtime of machines to go down. So and these are really the things we care as well, because our customers care. Our customers don't care what's happening on board level, on chip level. I think what we care and what our customers care is really combining things that come across the platforms, across the systems, and unite them to one, basically, hopefully, a unique solution on the market.
Okay. Well, this has been, we've covered quite a lot of ground. Maybe let's sum up by looking to the future. What do you think is your outlook to the market? I mean, in this landscape, it seems to me that more automated factories are going to become more critical, particularly in this time we're dealing with social distancing and so on, which has put some manufacturing at risk. But even longer term, I think, do you see the opportunity for more and more growth in this area? Is it up and to the right in smart manufacturing, in your opinion?
Really, no doubt about that. So I would even see, despite really being in a challenging time now, but basically the need is rising on a weekly basis. So basically everything that leads towards matte manufacturing there's a huge opportunity and really huge market out there, and really there is no sign of going down. So from that point of view, I'm absolutely optimistic, and also the investment readiness is absolutely there. So yeah, from this point of view, super optimistic going forward.
Yeah, and I echoed that as well. And I think even, in the world we live in right now, I think even in the last couple of months, we've seen almost bigger investments being made to accelerate this, adoption towards smart manufacturing and the journey to autonomous operations. I think we've solved a lot of the problems along the way, but we've still got some big nuts to crack, in the future around real time, as you said, and safety and some of these other topics. So I think we need to work on those together as an ecosystem and as an industry to solve them. But I think we're on a good track. I'm optimistic too.
This sounds very exciting, and I'm thrilled for this insight you've all provided. We've covered quite a lot of ground here, and I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours, but I think we're going to have to draw it to a close. But let me first start by thanking our participants, Stefan and Neil. Thank you for your perspectives, and I also want to give you each a chance to say if our listeners would like to learn more, where can they go to learn about these markets, about your companies, and about these solutions? Stefan, is there a website or a place they should go to read about you and your company?
Well, first of all, thanks to you, John, for the opportunity to chat with you. It was a really an exciting discussion. And yes, anyone listening to us today, please reach out to me. For sure, you find me on LinkedIn. But otherwise, for sure, there is the BNR website, which is bnr-automation.com. And there, for sure, you find lots of interesting information around the future of manufacturing.
Yeah. Yeah, on my side, yeah, and also I echo the thanks to both. It's been a very stimulating conversation. As far as information, we have a great website. It's www.arm.com/solutions/industrial, and you'll find lots of product-based information there, and white papers and application notes and the like. And again, feel free to reach out to me directly or LinkedIn as well. That's a great point, Stefan, that you made. So thanks, everyone.
Well, we look forward to more conversation in this area, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for listening to ARM Presents Fireside Chat. ARM's technology is at the heart of computing and connectivity. Their advanced, energy-efficient processor designs have enabled intelligent computing in more than 150 billion chips. You most probably have ARM tech in your smartphone, and increasingly, it's in the world's most powerful supercomputers. If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd love it if you could leave a 5-star rating and tell a friend. For more information on ARM, visit arm.com.